here with On3 national guru Andy Staples. Andy, you've been around Tennessee's program a little bit the last 24 to 48 hours. What's kind of impressed you about just kind of what this program looks like now versus a few years ago?
It just seems deeper with the big guys, especially on the D-line.
Yeah.
And that's what we were always wondering, okay, with Josh Heupel, we've seen the offense, we've seen how good it can be, but when it was really good a couple of years ago, they had a really good offensive line. They had a first-rounder in Darnell Wright, an offensive tackle. And you wonder, okay, what would happen if you had fairly deep units on both lines of scrimmage? And I think they're getting there. D-line, they're very deep. This is as deep as I can remember a Tennessee defensive line being. And then offensive line, I feel like they're starting five. They should feel pretty good about. And they're developing some depth. Like Javonte Spraggins is out this spring, so they're developing some depth there. And at least watching him walk around, Lance Hurd looks like a supreme athlete. And you understand Lance Hurd's situation at LSU.
Sure.
I mean, Will Campbell, Emory Jones, those guys are first or second round draft picks. They're 2-year starters already entering their junior years. Like, he was in a situation where he wasn't going to get to play at offensive tackle this year. And that guy, that's not a guard. That's a tackle.
Yeah.
So you watch him, move around, and it's like, okay, this could be pretty interesting. And then, I think with Tennessee, everything still comes down to what does the offense look like with Nico running it versus with Joe Milton running it. And that's what I'm curious to see. That's what I want to see when they take the field, when they have their spring game. Like, what does this offense look like?
A year ago, the improvisation that was there under Hendon was not there. Like,
right.
When things broke down, you couldn't just toss it 4 yards to a guy and let him go make a play. Do you think that's back this year? Because I think
so.
Nico showed flashes of that in the bowl game.
I think the middle of the field is back.
Yeah.
I think that's something that kind of got taken away last season. And when you bring back true RPOs, which Nico can run, all of a sudden you're putting defenders in conflict in the middle of the field who didn't have to worry about that last year. And so they're going to be a lot tougher for defensive coordinators to deal with, and they're going to be a lot tougher, especially for some of those linebackers and safeties that are going to be the conflict players that have to figure out what the heck Nico's doing with the ball. Because I thought in the bowl game you saw some moments where, there was much more willingness to pull and run.
Yeah.
Much more comfort with the read option. And I think that's the part that people don't understand. A read option is not a typical handoff. And some quarterbacks are really good at it and some quarterbacks are not. It was not something Joe Milton was great at. And when you are just running typical handoffs, the defense has a lot less to worry about. When there's a true mesh, quarterback's got the ball in the backs of bellies. The guy that's one guy you're not blocking, you're just reading him.
Yeah.
So everybody else is blocking somebody else. Like it basically adds another player to your offense, essentially. And that's what makes this so interesting. And also, 2 years ago I was here, you and I were out watching Nico playing a 7-on-7 tournament as a recruit. He was a 6'5", 6'6", 195-pound beanpole. You see him walking around now, he looks like a grown-ass man.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference, too, because even in high school, he looked like he was a physical runner when you watched his film. You saw it in the bowl game.
Yeah.
That, I think, adds another element to it. And so he's got to prove that he's the passer everybody expects him to be. But I think just the elements that will be added to Tennessee's offense will make it more difficult to defend.
Defensively, more athletic in the back end. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you know what you're
getting
up front.
They seem pretty deep at corner right now, which is something that...
For a team that really overhauled their whole secondary.
Yeah. Yeah, and it felt like they went to the portal and got some guys to compete.
Yeah.
And they've probably found more starter quality guys than they thought they were going to find.
Yeah, Jermod McCoy, I think they have a ton of high hopes for. You look at, the kid they got from Temple, another solid contributor, I think. And then you hope that, Ricky Gibson continues to progress, Christian Conyer, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think, if that happens with that defensive line, because they're going to be able to rush the passer. So the secondary is going to have a little bit easier job than they had last year. But I think that depth on the D-line they should be able to keep guys fresh. I heard you and Brent Hubbs on a video talking about, just them being able to help improve the offensive line.
Yeah.
Because all of the offensive linemen, including the second teamers, are playing against dudes who've played in the SEC before on defense. And that makes a big difference. And not fun when you're those offensive linemen playing against more experienced, older, bigger guys. but very helpful. I think back to Art Kehoe was the longtime offensive line coach at Miami, and for all those years when Miami was winning national titles, and he's like, we got our asses whipped 5 days a week by the defensive line that had Russell Maryland, and Warren Sapp, and all those guys,
and made it better.
But on Saturday, never lost, and that's what you're hoping that depth on D-line helps to create in the offensive line.
Yeah, well, we're going to break some news right here. Andy's been around the program. James Pierce, pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's all right.
Pretty good.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where you knew how good he was last year, but it does seem like he's developed even more. He's so quick, and he's just one of those guys that the explosiveness is very obvious. And
he's big.
It's got to be scary if you're an offensive tackle because he's so he can be gone just like that. Yeah. But he has some diverse moves, and I think he's going to be fun to watch. And we're recording this before Pro Day, and he's going to be the guy everybody in the NFL is here to see next year. So that's going to be fun to watch. But getting back to the offensive side of the ball, the one place I want to see what they do is tight end, because that's a place they had to go into the portal. Holden Stays looks the part for sure. Can he give them what they need there? And if he can, I think that gives them a pretty complete group on it. Chris Brazzell, that was one thing, seeing him in person. He's bigger than I thought that he'd be from watching him play at Tulane. If they get all that together, Brew McCoy comes back healthy, this is a pretty deep group all around. And that's something that even when Tennessee was really good 2 years ago, it didn't feel that way.
I agree. It didn't feel like they were super deep. Now, their starters made it work, but always knew kind of like they were 1 or 2 injuries away from being. Yeah. Now you feel like they could lose one guy or two, and it's not as bad.
There's a couple position groups. Like there's a few offensive linemen. I think if they went down, there'd be some trouble.
Tackle.
Well, Cooper Mays again. I mean, that you saw last year what a problem that was without him. But there are many more places where you'd feel comfortable. Okay, they can absorb this. And I gotta say, you look around the country right now, there's not a lot of schools that are in that position. There's a few. Georgia and Alabama, obviously in the SEC. I think Ole Miss is feeling like they're that way right now. But LSU's got position groups where they're scared to death of an injury. A lot of the better teams, they're kind of riding that razor's edge because thanks to NIL, you can't build the kind of depth like the old Alabama teams had. Yeah, you just can't do it. And so this is about, I think in this era of college football, this is about as good as you can expect.
No doubt about it. Last thing, we'll get you out the door. I was asked earlier this week on the radio about what are the expectations for Tennessee, and I said I think the expectations from everybody over here is to be one of the 12 teams in the 12-team playoff. Mm-hmm. You agree?
I think that's fair for them to expect. I do. You look at the schedule, I think Tennessee and Ole Miss got the best schedule draws in the SEC. I think that they're the most advantageous. I would be mad if I were Georgia. I'd be mad if I were Florida because I feel like they got a little harder run. But you look at Tennessee's schedule, you look at the personnel, you look at where the games fall. You can go 10-2.
Yeah,
and if you go 10-2 in this SEC in 2024, you are going to make the playoff. So it's a matter of who's going to do that. It's going to be at least 3 SEC teams in there. It's possibly 4. So who are the ones that can hit double digits? That's really all it comes down to, I think.
He is On Three's Andy Staples, and I'm Austin Price.